طيب الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we'll continue tonight what we began discussing last week, and that is the ahkam of a siyam, the rules and regulations related to a siyam. And we started last week with a muqaddimah, a preface, if you will, in which we talked about the definition of fasting linguistically and Islamically. And we mentioned some of the virtues of fasting outside of Ramadan. And then we mentioned specifically the virtues of fasting Ramadan, or the virtues of Ramadan. And then after that, we talked about some of the shurut of fasting. Shurut as-sihha, the conditions for the acceptability, or the shurut for the validity of fasting. And then we mentioned some of the we mentioned first of all shurut al-wujub, the conditions for fasting becoming wajib upon a person. And then we mentioned shurut al-sihha, the conditions for fasting being valid. That basically, not everyone who fasting is required for them, their fasting will be valid. And not everyone who fasting is not required for them, their fasting will be invalid. So we talked about the difference between those two. So, let's just recap really quickly, al-Ujala. What is the definition of fasting in the language of the Arabs? What is fasting? Basically, essentially.
Abstaining.
Abstaining, al-imsak. Ahsanti. طيب. Now, what was the proof for that? What's the proof that fasting is mutlaq al-imsak? It is restraining, it's abstinence in general, and it's not specific to food and drink, etc. What's the proof for that? تفضل.
The ayah of Maryam alayhi salam, when she was told to refrain from speaking to people.
أحسنت. وجه الدلالة. So how does this ayah tell us that fasting can be refraining from anything? Hey, so how does it prove it though? Hey, clarify to me. أحسنت, you're right though. You're spot on. Do you want me to read the ayah?
Yeah.
And then you can dissect it? Okay, so the ayah is فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّي عَيْنَا فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشْرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَظَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. So the angel told her, eat and drink and be glad, rejoice. And if you see any person, anyone from mankind today, then say to that person, I have vowed a fast for the most merciful, and I will not speak to any person this day. Okay, so how does that ayah tell us that fasting can be what? Abstaining from anything. In the language, at least. Hey, okay, that's part of it. So she said, I won't speak to anyone today. But what tells me that? Okay, so I vowed to Ar-Rahman as-Sawm, I vowed to Ar-Rahman a fast, and I won't speak to anyone today. So that was how she was going to fast. She explained that. No. And how do we know that her fasting didn't really refer to abstaining from eating and drinking? Because the angel told in the beginning, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي, right? So she was actually observing a fast while what? While eating and drinking, which tells you that in the language of the Arabs, that fasting is what? It's not specific to anything, but it's what? Abstinence. Mutlaq al-imsak. It's what? Abstinence in general. Restraining. But in the language of the Shara, in the Islamically speaking, then fasting is what? A specific type of abstinence. Abstaining from what? From certain things, from specific things. And those things are food, drink, and intimacy in the daylight hours of what? Of Ramadan. Okay? And it's not just food and drink and intimacy, but anything which what? Can be analogous to those things. Remember we said that as well. So for example, if a person was to receive an IV, that's not what? food. It's not drink, but it's analogous to food and drink, and so therefore it would do what? It would break their fast. You guys see that? So ثم بعد ذلك we mentioned the ruling of fasting. What is the ruling of fasting in Ramadan? Is it recommended? Is it discouraged?
Obligatory.
It's obligatory. It's wajib. Okay, what's the proof it's wajib? What's the proof that it's wajib? Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. So the ayah in the Quran, Allah says, Kutiba alaykum, fasting has been prescribed. Kutiba means what? Ujiba. It's been what? It's required. Okay, it's required. Okay, is it just the Quran, or do we have a hadith that tells us it's wajib as well? Any hadith we know that tells us that fasting is wajib? That we have to fast? Bunya al-Islam al-Khams. Islam is built upon 5, and he mentioned one of them was fasting the month of Ramadan. And if Islam is built upon it, then it must be what? Obligatory. It must be wajib. But the scholars have also agreed that what? Fasting is wajib. So basically, fasting is wajib bil kitab, by virtue of the Quran, the Sunnah, and the agreement of the scholars. But we mentioned quite a few narrations which talk about the virtue of fasting. Fasting what? In general. The virtue of fasting in general. Who can tell me what they remember of things that we mentioned that indicate the virtue of fasting? Anything you remember that we mentioned. And you don't have to know the hadith by heart, but just the virtue itself. Wa alaikum salam. The virtue of fasting. Anyone? Some other than Muhammad Nahas. Someone else. Anything that we mentioned last week about from the virtues of fasting, in general.
It have to be aqil.
You're not allowed to speak. I'll let you know when you can answer. Atfadri. You said something. Atfadri. You.
Me?
Yeah.
We were saying the same thing, that the doors of heaven are open when you're fasting.
Okay, so now, but that's specific to what?
Ramadan.
Okay, so we want something which is general. Fasting in general. And then we'll come to the virtues of fasting in Ramadan. Okay?
So if you fasted, wasn't it about if you do fast, even not during Ramadan, you're automatically, the door for heaven is open to you when you eat.
Okay, so it's one of the causes for entering paradise.
Yeah.
And how do we know that? Because the Prophet said in the hadith, he said that there is a door or a gate in heaven which is called al-Rayyan. And this door, no one enters it except as-Sa'imun, the faster. So that lets you know that one of the causes for entering paradise is what? It's fasting. Mumtaz. Any other virtues you remember of just fasting? Any virtues?
Fasting will come as an intercessor.
Ahsan, fasting will intercede for you on the day of judgment. Mumtaz. Ahsan, Sheikh. So fasting will intercede for you on the day of judgment. That's another virtue of fasting. Anything else? Anything else? Purification in what sense? Change purification to protection. Protection from what?
Shaitan.
Okay, think of that. You're doing good, Muhammad. You're doing good. Don't blow it. Don't blow it. All right? I'm help you. All right. Now, we said that fasting was a cause to enter paradise. So conversely, it's going to be protection from the hellfire. It's going to be protection from the hellfire. To the point the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if a person fasted one day in the way of Allah, Allah would, because of that one day, place a distance between his face and the fire of 70 years. 70 years for one. For one day. Allahu Akbar. Tayyib Mumtaz. So I'll mention ala ujala, the rest of them. We also said that as-sawm was what? The best of deeds. To the point that one of the Prophet's companions, Abi Umama, he came to him, he said, Murni bi'amal. He said, command me to do something. Tell me to do something good. And the Prophet responded, he said, Alayka bis-sawm fa innahu la idla lahu. He said, take to fasting because there's nothing what? That can equate to it. Nothing can equal it. Nothing can what? Can match it. Another thing is that when we fast, we get a reward for fasting which is not comparable to any other what? The reward for any other deed and the way that Allah rewards for fasting is different than the way He rewards for other deeds, and no one knows the reward you're going to get except Allah. Nobody can measure it except Allah. To the point that He said in the Qudsi Hadith, He said that all of the deeds of the son of Adam will be rewarded. One ajr, bi ashram thaliha. One reward to what? 10 times it, right? And He'll continue to multiply up to 700. So there's a cap. 700. So you might do one deed and get rewarded as if you did it 700 times. He said, إِلَّا الصَّوْمَ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. He said, except fasting, because it's for me, and so I'm going to give a special reward for it that only He knows. One more virtue of the fasting is we said that it protects your chastity. It protects you what? It protects you from falling into what? Into abominable sins, among them illicit sexual intercourse. As mentioned in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in which the Prophet said, يَا مَعْشَرَ الشَّبَابِ مَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمْ الْبَاءَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ فَإِنَّهُ غَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَأَحْصَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِيعْ فَعَلَيْهِ الصَّوْمُ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. So he said in the hadith, he said, "O young men, those of you who have the financial means to get married, then get married, because it will do what? It will help you lower your gaze and guard your chastity. And whoever is not able to do that, then let him fast, because it will do what? It will protect him. It will protect him and be a shield for him from illicit relations." طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, let's mention على عجالة فضائل رمضان. Virtues of Ramadan. One of them the sister mentioned is that the gates of paradise are flung open on their hinges, and the gates of hell are what? Are locked shut, and those mischievous shayateen, the most rebellious ones, are what?
Chained.
Are chained. They're bound, right? Okay. What else about Ramadan? What are the virtues of Ramadan? What happened? What specific event happened in Ramadan? Laylatul Qadr is one of them, which the value, the worship in Laylatul Qadr is like the worship of what, 1,000 months. Okay, what else happened in Ramadan on Laylatul Qadr?
The Quran.
The Quran. So the Shahr Ramadan is what? The month of what? The Quran. Shahr al-Quran is the month of the Quran. Right? Okay? So that's some of the virtues. Alright, what are the conditions for fasting to be wajib? What are the conditions that have to be met in order for fasting to be obligatory upon a person? He would have to be, he'd have to have what? His intellect. Okay, he'd have to have his sanity. What is Fairuz? He has to be what? He has to be an adult. He has to be baligh. He has to be mature. What else would he have to be? I have a non-Muslim neighbor.
Capable.
Does he have to fast?
No.
My non-Muslim neighbor doesn't have to fast?
Muslim.
He's an adult though, when he has sanity. But he's not what? Muslim. Okay, he has to be Muslim. Okay, and the last thing?
Capable.
He has to be what? Capable. So if he's physically incapable, sick, or he has some type of illness where he has to take medicine, that person will not be required to fast. Okay. But can young people fast? Can young people fast? Young people can what? Can fast, and their fast will be what? It will be accepted. It will be accepted from them, even though they're not obligated to fast. Okay, so young people can fast. Okay, Mumtaz. All right, with that said,
Can I ask a question?
let's go to work. Fadli.
I don't know, maybe I read it wrong, but it's a memory from a book. Isn't there supposed to be like a specific time in the morning during Ramadan that the gates of heaven are more open, but nobody knows which time it is?
Really?
Or is that just something from something else I read? That
I'm not familiar with that, because I mean the way the hadith is worded is that from the first day of Ramadan, the doors of paradise are what? They're flung open on their hinges. I mean,
okay.
they can't be any more open than that.
Maybe it's misinterpretation.
Yeah, Allah knows best. I'm not saying that. You're probably right, I'm probably wrong. I have to look into it, inshallah. All right, let's talk now about Sunan as-Siyam. What are some of the acts that are what? Highly recommended and encouraged that we should do to increase the reward that we'll get for our fasting in Ramadan? What are some of those things that we should do to increase our reward, for the reward for our fasting in Ramadan? I kind of request from the sisters, if they have a question, to go ahead and direct that question to me. And if they don't have any questions, I kindly appreciate if they didn't speak while the class is going on. Jazakallah khair. So the first sunnah the first act that we're encouraged to do to increase the reward is ta'jeel al-fitr. Ta'jeel al-fitr. To basically hasten in the fast breaking. So the first moment that we're allowed to break the fast, we should what? Break the fast. And we shouldn't be like those people who the sun has set, the adhan has been called, and they do what?
Still waiting.
They sit there and they wait until they feel sure. They might even wait till it gets dark outside before they what? Break their fast.
That's too much.
But the Muslim is supposed to do what? He's supposed to hasten. He's supposed to hasten. Once the time has come, he's supposed to hasten. And this is by agreement of the scholars. The scholars have agreed that this is how he should handle his business in Ramadan. And this is supported by the hadith, quoted by Bukhari Muslim, on the authority of Sa'd ibn Sa'd, Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'di, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يزال الناس بخير ما عجلوا الفطر. He said, people will not cease to be what? In a good state. As long as they do what? They hasten to break the fast. So it's incumbent upon the Muslim, when the time for fast breaking has come, to do what? To hasten and not to what? To delay. That's the first sunnah, ta'jeel al-fitr. The second one is ta'khir al-suhoor. That just like you hasten to end the fast, you delay what? You delay beginning it. You delay beginning it with what? As-suhoor. So you delay the suhoor until what? Until what? The time which is closest to the beginning of the fast. And this is also mustahab bil-ijma'. It's also highly recommended by agreement of the scholars. And that's supported by the hadith collected by al-Bukhari Muslim again, on the authority of Anas, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Tasahharu." Anas, he said, Anas was Zayd ibn Thabit. They said, "Tasahharna ma'a an-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ثم قام إلى الصلاة. قلت كم كان بين الأذان والسحور؟ قال قدر 50 آية." So in this hadith, Anas and Zayd ibn Thabit, they were discussing, or they were telling the people that they had what? That they had taken the suhoor, they'd taken the pre-dawn meal with the Prophet ﷺ. And he stood up, after they ate, he stood up to do what? He stood up to perform the prayer. Meaning what? Fajr prayer. So then they were asked, how much time was there between his suhoor and the adhan? How much time between the meal he ate and the adhan? And so they responded, قَدْرَ 50 آية. They said it was the length of time it takes to recite 50 ayat, 50 verses of the Quran. How long do you think that would take? 50 ayat?
20 minutes.
50 ayat? No, people do a whole 20 minutes.
No, 20 minutes. Maybe 10
so
minutes.
50 ayat.
10 minutes.
50 ayat?
Yeah.
No, more
Ayat, Sheikh. Think about it.
I say
We do about 20 pages in 20 minutes. Some people do a juz'a, which is about 20 pages, in 20 minutes.
But it'd be different in Salah. You take your time.
No. He's saying the time it would take for a person, just to recite 50 ayat.
Okay.
So what do you think, 50 ayat?
Half an hour or so.
Huh?
Maybe half an hour.
Half an hour for 50 ayat?
No,
Yeah, because we read the Quran slowly.
Okay, but think about
Rushing.
it, Muhammad Nahas. If I gave you the Mus'haf right now and I said, read Juz' Am, and you read it, hadiram,
Because
how long would it take, you think?
like Surah Al-Kahf takes me about half an hour.
Kahf?
Surah Al-Kahf.
No.
110.
Nahas.
110. So half would be 50 minutes. 15 minutes.
No. I'm confident, Sheikh Muhammad, if I said read Juz' Amma right now, Juz' Kamil, and you probably would do it in 20 minutes, less than 20 minutes.
Hadr.
Yeah, you'd read it probably 15 minutes. 15.
I don't like Hadr.
Alright? So now 50 ayat, I'd say it might take a person 3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes. Think about it.
That's quick.
50 ayat though, you Sheikh. It's just ayat. And we're not talking about
It depends
suwar.
which part of the Quran.
He says depends.
The verses could be
Yeah,
small.
it's long.
Al-Muhim, it's not going to be that long what?
Correct.
That long of a time.
Sure. Okay.
We all agree on that. We
Yeah.
we might not agree. We'll have to actually make an actual experiment to come to a particular specific time. But we all agree it's a short amount of what time? That's the point that the Sahabi is trying to make. That look, between the time that the Prophet stood up to pray Fajr and the time he stopped eating was what? A short time. As Ibn Hajar, he pointed out, he said that's indicative that the Prophet used to do what? Delay a suhoor. He wasn't like some people who they'll make suhoor maybe after they finish Taraweeh. They'll go home, they'll eat some food, they'll lay down, and they'll get up for Fajr. And that will be the suhoor. Or they might get up in the middle of the night and have a suhoor. Or they have something called al-Imsak. They have they have these schedules, and the schedule will have a special column, okay, for what? Al-Imsak. So they'll say, but you have to stop eating 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before the adhan. You guys follow that?
But it's not a sunnah.
No, it's not. It's not a sunnah to do that, because actually you should do what? Make it as close as possible to what? The adhan. And there's a hikmah in that. There's a wisdom in that. And one of the wisdoms in that is that the closer you eat to Fajr, the more the benefit of the food will stay with you throughout the day. If you were to eat early in the evening, let's say, so then you're fasting actually all night. Is that not so?
Absolutely.
So that's an additional, several hours, couple of hours, add on to what? To the fasting. But the closer you put it to Fajr, then the more the food continues to benefit you throughout the day. So there's a wisdom in it as well. So we mentioned two sunnah, we mentioned two encouraged practices. The first one is to hasten the break of the fast, and the second one is to what? To delay a suhoor. The third one is that you increase in the good deeds. Do as much khair, do as much good as you can, whether that be al-qira'ah, reading the Quran, al-dhikr, giving charity, any good deed, you try to do more and more of the good deeds while you are fasting. You should seize this time of barakah, to what? To do lots and lots of good deeds while you're fasting. And this is indicated by a number of evidences. There's a number of proofs for this. Among them is the hadith that's by Bukhari Muslim, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, in which he said, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أجود الناس بالخير وكان أجود ما يكون في رمضان. He said the Prophet ﷺ was the person who was the most generous with what? With the good things that he had. And he was even more generous, excessively generous in Ramadan. Excessively generous in Ramadan. So he would ramp up his generosity and be more generous in Ramadan. We also have those ahadith on the authority of Aisha, in which she specifically talks about the Prophet toward the end of Ramadan. Toward the end of Ramadan. So for example, we have the hadith of Muslim, actually the Bukhari Muslim, in which Aisha, she said, إِذَا دَخَلَ الْعَشْرِ أَحْيَا لَيْلَةً وَأَيْقَظَ أَهْلَهُ وَشَدَّ مِنْزَرَةً. Right? So she said that when the last 10 days would come, the Prophet would do what? He would give life to his night, which means what? He would spend more of the night in devotions. He would have a much longer and more active night vigil. In addition to this, he would do what? He would wake up his family so that they would do the same thing. وَشَدَّ مِئْزَرَةً. He would tighten what? His waist wrapper, which is a kinaya. It's an allusion to the fact that the Prophet would do what? Would stay away from his wives and not engage in intimacy, but would spend that time in worship. We also have the statement of Jabir ibn Abdullah, who spoke about how people should behave when they're fasting. And in the course of that statement that he made, he said, وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَوْمَ صَوْمِكَ وَيَوْمَ فِطْرِكَ سَوَاءً. He said, don't make your days of fasting and your days of non-fasting equivalent. There should be a marked difference in terms of what? Your behavior and your worship when you are fasting. So it's incumbent upon the Muslim when he's fasting to do what? To ramp up his what? His commitment to doing good deeds and his ijtihad, his exerting himself in the acts of worship. So those are three sunan. Ta'jil al-fitr, hastening and breaking the fast. Ta'khir al-suhoor, delaying the suhoor. And also what? Ramping up our worship and our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while we're fasting. طيب, a fourth sunnah is that it may happen in Ramadan that people's tempers tend to do what? Tend to flare. Can that happen in Ramadan? I wonder why that happens in Ramadan. Maybe one reason is because you're hungry, and when you're hungry, you're a little bit more prone to be agitated. And on top of that, the last few Ramadans have occurred in what?
Summer.
In the summer. So the heat also has a tendency to what? Agitate you. These two things come together. A person is what? Their fuse tends to be a little what? A little shorter, right? So when that happens, tempers flare, fuses are shorter, people may have a tendency to what? To get angry and to what? To start to argue. They want to argue. They pick a fight. And so it's from the sunnah, when this happens in Ramadan, that we do what? We diffuse the situation by saying out loud, I'm fasting. Right? This is from the sunnah. You say it out loud, I'm fasting. To what? To shut the person down, to diffuse the person. If you were really fasting, you wouldn't be behaving that way, and I'm not going to stoop to your level because I'm fasting. As we have the hadith, let's about Bukhari Muslim again, in which, on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ صَوْمِ أَحَدِكُمْ فَلَا يَرْفَضْ وَلَا يَسْخَبْ فَإِنْ شَاتَمُ أَحَدٌ أَوْ قَاتَلَ فَلْيَقُولْ إِنِّي امْرُؤٌ صَائِمٌ. So he said, if one of you is fasting, then he should not speak what? Indecently. And he should not argue with anyone. And if someone were to come and insult him, to basically try to pick a fight with him, he should say, I am what? I am fasting. Okay, so that's another important sunnah, a very important sunnah, that we don't allow ourselves to get riled up in Ramadan, and we diffuse the situation by saying what? I'm fasting. And then keep it moving. So that's 4 sunnah. The 5th one is that, in general, the fasting person, when they break their fast, they should be keen to do what? To make dua. They should be keen to make dua. And there are a number of hadith which indicate that the da'wah, the supplication of the fasting person when they break their fast is accepted. In fact, it is a supplication which is not what? Rejected. Now there are a number of hadith along this line, and one of them has been authenticated by al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala in Sahih al-Jami'. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the one where it says, ثَلَاثَةٌ لَا تُرَدُّ دَعْوَتُهُمْ. There are 3 people who their supplications will not be rejected. They will not be turned away. And one of them, as-sa'im hina yuftir. The fasting person when he breaks his fast. Now the question comes, is there a specific dua that one is encouraged to make when they break their fast? Because we do have some of those narrations which indicate that the fasting person should say what? Should say this specifically. So one of those supplications is the one which says, Allahumma laka sumtu wa ala rizqika aftartu subhanaka wa bihamdika Allahumma taqabbal minni innaka anta as-sami'ul alim. So this dua, it says, O Allah, for you I have fasted. And upon your provisions, I have broken my fast. Subhanak, glory be to you. Wa bihamdik, and your praise. Allahumma taqabbal minni, O Allah, accept from me, innaka anta as-sami' al-alim. O Allah, you are the oft-hearing, or the all-hearing, the all-knowing. This dua is what? Is weak. It is not authentic. And although it is commonly spoken, it is commonly used and employed by the Muslims, it is not authentic. And it was declared weak by a number of scholars, among them Sheikh rahimahullah ta'ala. There's another one which is a little bit more what? More common. And there's difference of opinion about its authenticity. And most of you probably know this one. ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. ذهب الظمأ, the thirst has what? Has gone. وابتلت العروق, And now those veins which were dry from fasting have become what? Moist again. وَثَبَتَ الْأَجْرِ, and what? The reward for this fast is what? Is confirmed. Insha'Allah. By the permission of Allah. This is another one that the scholars have differed about its authenticity, and Allah knows best. It is what? It is also unauthentic. So what the Muslim should do is he should make a general dua for whatever. He should make a general dua for whatever, but he shouldn't stick to a specific dua, because none of the specific dua for this occasion are authentic. Also, the scholars have differed about, is it specific to breaking the fast, or should the fasting person spend the day of fasting in dua and supplication? And Allah knows best. It's incumbent upon the fasting person not just to make dua when he breaks his fast, but to seize the opportunity given to him by the day of fasting to what? To make lots of supplications. And the scholars have used different wordings in the previous hadith. Different wordings in the previous hadith that we mentioned was authenticated by al-Albani. They've used different wordings of that to support this. And they've also used the verses of fasting in the Quran. Because if you notice in those verses, Allah begins talking about what? Fasting, and some of its ahkam, some of its rules and regulations. And then right in the middle of that, He says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So He says, right in the middle of ayat related to fasting, He says what? He says, and if my servants ask you about me, I am indeed near to them. I answer the call of the one who calls upon me when he calls. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. So let them give their response to me. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي, and let them believe in me. Believe what? That I will answer their supplications. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So that they will be guided. The scholars understood from this, they extracted from this, that the fasting person should what? Should busy himself throughout the day of fasting in what? In dua, supplication, and his supplications will be answered. Not just when he breaks his fast, but even while he's what? While he's fasting. تفضل محمد نحاس. بارك الله فيك. إيه.
I'd like to add something.
تفضل, please.
Thank you so much.
إيه. I knew that wouldn't. I knew that wouldn't يعجبك. تفضل يا شيخ.
اللهم لك صمت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. This is the whole thing. The first portion is unauthentic. Okay. But the second portion is here in
authenticated by who?
al-Albani.
Al-Albani. وضعفه شيخ مقبل. So now what do we do?
Is it?
Yeah. ضعفه شيخ مقبل. So now what do we do? We have to go back now. If they differ, we have to go back and study the hadith.
May Allah bless you. Here it says, al-Albani صحيح الجامع الصغير.
Jameen. And I agree with you. I agree with you.
This is supplication of Abdullah ibn Amr.
Hey, I agree with you.
Al-Hafiz. Graded is as good.
I agree with you.
And
I agree with you.
An-Nawawi.
I agree with you.
And that's what we know, because I haven't heard that Al-Muqbil, he declined on that.
All right. Let's see what we got here.
Because that's what I know is all the books that I have read.
Let's see what the checking I have on it.
Thank you so much.
لحظة شوي. ذهب الظلم وابتلت العروق وثبت الويس الضعيف في إسناده مروان بن سالم. Okay. So what I have on the checking of it, Sheikh Muhammad, is that in its isnad is a man by the name of Marwan ibn Salim. And Marwan ibn Salim, lam yuwathiqhu, nobody gave him tawthiq except Ibn Hibban. The asl is tafarrud Ibn Hibban. في التوثيق معناه ضعف الراوي. هذا هو الأصل. And the earlier scholars, they didn't authenticate this hadith. And the people you're going to run into that authenticated it will be more like the latter day scholars. But again, as I said, the scholars, they differ among the contemporaries. Sheikh Muqbil rahimahullah ta'ala, he declares it unauthentic. Sheikh Albani declares it hasan. So basically now, we have to go back. Once they differ, we have to go back to the Senate. Now what I will tell you is that when they differ about things like this, and we go back to the Senate, and we're kind of in between the two. There are certain principles that we use. One principle is that anytime a hadith is related to an act of worship, we incline toward what? At-tad'if. We always incline toward what? At-tad'if. If it's related to an act of worship, we incline toward what? Toward weakness. That's an important principle. The other principle is that we always like to prefer as-salaf al-khalaf. We always like to prefer the early scholars over the latter-day scholars. So these are some principles that we use to come to the conclusion that what? A hadith is da'if when the scholars differ.
I'm really surprised if he really Albani,
Okay.
bless his soul, Abdullah, if he, this has something wrong with the authenticity of that hadith,
Okay.
he would mention that.
I mean,
Allah bless him.
to be honest with Sheikh Muhammad, we have the utmost respect for Imam al-Albani. But one thing we recognize with all the scholars, regardless of their knowledge, regardless of their diqqah, their
Muhaddith,
I know, I understand that, but so is Muqbil. The point I'm trying to make is that regardless of their status, regardless of their speciality, regardless of, they're humans at the end of the day. And what our job is to respect them, but never to blind follow them. That's our job. To respect them and, to use what scholarship we have to try to, whenever they differ, to try to come to a conclusion. We've been doing this for centuries. It doesn't change when we come to the 20th century and we come to a great imam, an imam of imams like al-Albani. The same thing we did with Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi'i and Ahmed. The same thing we did. They differed.
Yeah.
And we did what? We go ahead and we sift and we compare. We hold their opinions up to the light of the Adly. And sometimes we say, what, Abu Hanifa? Akhta. We say that. Wow, it's a big statement to say that. But we say it without any hesitation. Because what? He's a human being. It doesn't change when we come to what? The modern age, and we have what? Al-Albani. Imam. Yeah, Akid. But لكن Bashar. Hey, Bashar.
I haven't heard that before.
Hey, but I mean, we can look into it. Research it. Yeah. Barakallahu feek. طيب. ثم بعد that, so we mentioned.
Wrong light.
Whoa. Okay. طيب, so we mentioned some sunan. Let's just recap before we complete this section. So the first sunnah that we mentioned was what? What was the first sunnah?
Can you turn those fans, please? Please.
Turn them off, man. You guys are cold.
Yeah, very cold.
You Southerners.
Yeah, we are.
I'm loving this, man. Give me more. Turn them high.
It's cold.
That's just there for decoration, man. We don't turn these things on, right?
He likes the freeze.
Yes, I love it cold. Yeah, bring it on. All right. So let's recap. So we said the first sunnah was what? Ta'jeel al-fitr. Hastening and what? Breaking the fast. Number 2, ta'khir al-suhoor, delaying the suhoor. Number 3, doing lots of what? Of good deeds while you're fasting. Number 4, if someone argues with you, tries to curse you, you say out loud, I'm what? I'm fasting. General, when you break your fast, you should do what? Make dua. And many of the scholars supporting it with lots of evidences, including the hadith that was mentioned here, is you should make dua throughout the day of fasting. And then, according to Muhammad Nahas, there's a specific dua you should make. And what's that dua, Sheikh Muhammad? ذهب الظمأ وابتلت الروح وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. And the scholars are different about it. And it's a difference of opinion. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك Huh? No, I'm nothing. I just convey. إنما أنا ناقل يا شيخ. أنا ناقل.
Me too, I'm not too.
I'm just teasing you, Sheikh. Don't take it personally, Sheikh. All right. طيب, so now we come to another sunnah. And that's when you break your fast. Is there anything specific you should break it with? تفضلي. Dates. أحسنتي.
4 days.
طيب, huh?
رطب.
Well, there's a couple of hadith, Sheikh Muhammad.
This is رطب.
You like رطب.
رطب, the Prophet رطب is not.
طيب, that hadith استغربه الترمذي وأبو زرعة أبو حاتم. The hadith about رطب. But there's another hadith, the hadith of Salman ibn Amr al-Tabbi, in which the Prophet said, إِذَا أَفْطَرَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيُفْتِرْ عَلَى تَمْرٍ. He just said what? Tamr. Dates. So as the sister said, Jazakallah khair, when you break your fast, you should break what? Break it on what? Dates, preferably an even number.
Odd.
An odd number. I just want to make sure you guys are with. Preferably what? An odd number. And Ibn Uyayna, he mentioned when he narrated the hadith, he added to that hadith, فَإِنَّهُ بَرَكَةٌ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَلْيُفْتِرْ عَلَى مَاءٍ فَإِنَّهُ طَهُورٌ. So basically, let's say that you don't have dates. You don't have dates. Then rather than dates, you should drink what? Water. You should drink water. So when we break our fast, we're encouraged. One of the sunan is to break your fast on what? An odd number of dates. And if you don't have dates, then what? Water. Okay? Alright? And if you don't, some scholars they say if you don't have dates or water, then something sweet. Something sweet. And that's because there's what? There's a health benefit once you've been fasting all day to what? Give your body that what? That burst of what? That burst of sugar. Right? So some scholars they add to as a third thing, or a third level, is that dates, water. If you don't have either one of those, and something sweet. Okay. But let's speak really quickly before we have to close, and we'll mention some of the acts which are discouraged while we're fasting. We could say makruhat and even muharramat as-siyam. Some things which are discouraged, and some things which are actually prohibited when we're fasting. And we know that there are such things that what? That they are prohibited, they are discouraged, and they can actually do what? Decrease the reward of fasting. We know this for certain, because we have the hadith in which the Prophet said, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوَى. That the fasting person may only get from his fasting hunger. That's all he benefits from his fasting is what? Hunger. So there's some things that he might do that will do what? Decrease the reward for his fasting to the point that way he doesn't get any reward. And you guys know that when you do an act of worship, you do it seeking two things. The first thing you seek is to get credit for it, and to not be blamed for not doing it. You guys understand that? And the second thing you seek from it is what? A thawab, the reward. And so sometimes what happens is we do an act of worship so poorly, the only thing we get up from it is what? The credit for doing it. It won't be said on the day of judgment you didn't pray. But you won't get any reward for that prayer. Why? Because you did so poorly. You guys understand that? Mm-hmm. So the same thing is true for what? Fasting. The Prophet is saying, لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِ إِلَّا الْجُوَى, means what? He'll get credit. He fasted, but he won't get any reward. He won't get any reward. But so what are some of these things that a person might do while fasting, and it could what? Decrease his reward or totally what? Nullify the reward. The first thing is al-kadhib, is to what? To lie. While he's fasting, if he speaks what? Falsely, it can do what? It can decrease the reward for his fasting and even what? Negate any reward he might receive. So we have the hadith of Bukhari on the Hadith of Hurairah. In which the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ وَالْجَهْلِ فَلَيْسَ اللَّهِ حَاجَةٌ أَنْ يَدَعْ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. He said in this hadith, whoever does not abstain from falsehood in word and deed, and ignorant behavior, then Allah is in no need, does not want him to leave his food and drink. And obviously when the Prophet said Allah is in no need, whether he told the truth or lied, Allah is still what? In no need. So when the Prophet says he's in no need, it means what? It's as if he's saying it won't be accepted. It won't be accepted. The Prophet used this wording to what? To imply the absence of acceptance. It won't be accepted. Meaning what? He'll get credit for having fasted, but he won't get any reward. Another thing is al-rafath wal-shatam wal-mushajara. These are things that we should avoid as well. Foul and indecent speech, cursing, insulting others, and argumentation, arguing. These are things we must avoid, must be keen to avoid while we're fasting. We have the hadith of Bukhari Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet said, الصوم جنة فإن كان يوم صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يسخط فإن سابه أحد أو شتم فليقول إني امرؤ صائم. So the Prophet said, fasting is a shield. So if one of you is fasting, then don't let him speak indecently and do not let him argue with anyone. So you come home, hard day's work, and your wife says, did you bring the bread? Did you bring the chicken? Or did you bring whatever? And you're